Hello and welcome to the Class A State Championship preview hosted by Skordle. Thank you to the law firm of Maples, Nix, and Dieselhorse for hosting our show today. And thank you to all the Skordle sponsors who support these schools and kids throughout the 2020 season. As everybody knows, 2020 has been a challenging year for all of us, but it's so exciting that we can watch so many different teams and games without leaving our own home. Thanks to Skordle, Adam and Corey and Ethan and everybody at Skordle doing an incredible job at bringing us some really great content throughout the year in sports. So thank you to Skordle for all that they do. And of course, Tom and Todd and all the and Swisher and all the announcers that come in and help us as well. I want to introduce my co-host for this preview show, Coach Jay Mendenhall of the Oklahoma Bible Academy Trojans out of Enid. And Coach, you and I watched just an incredible football game on Friday night between number 1 Pawhuska Huskies and number 2 Cashion Wildcats, with the Wildcats eventually advancing to the state championship game after a 7-6 win that really was finalized with a 52-yard pass from Ben Harmon to Lane Lagasse with just about 3 minutes left. Tell us your thoughts on that instant classic.
Well, I think we knew how good Cashion was, and the question was, how good is Pawhuska? And the answer is they're really good. Pawhuska's a really good team. Bryce Drummond's as good as advertised. I was, wondering how he was going to handle the jump in competition, and I'll talk about that in a second, but he's as good as advertised. Pawhuska's as good as advertised. I would say their defensive line is better than advertised even. Felt like they're just getting better and better. They have a high ceiling, and it felt like they were in Cashion's backfield the entire night. So really just a slugfest of a game. When there's a lot of hype behind the game, you don't really know what you're going to get. And it was an awesome game. It was just one of the best Class A games I've seen in a long time. Lots of talent on both sides of the ball. Like I said, what I wanted to see was, is Drummond and Pawhuska going to get impatient when they're not scoring 60 points? Because we knew they weren't going to score 60 points, right? And I thought they had a great game plan. They really kind of dink and dunked the whole game. They took what Cashion gave them. With a couple exceptions, they didn't just start chucking and ducking whenever things weren't going like they have been against other competition. And so I thought Drummond did a really good job checking down. I thought the play calling was good for them for the game, just trying to get the feel of the game and knowing that you just really aren't going to get huge shots on Cashion until that opportunity presents itself. I didn't feel like they pressed that too awful much. So really just an incredible game. And the whole game, I felt like the Cashion, I think everyone felt like this, that they just bent and bent and bent, but they never broke, right? They when it came down to it, they made the stops. And the difference in the score was just getting a 2-point conversion stop on a swinging gate in the second quarter there. So it was an incredible game. Cashion defensive coordinator Tony Wood had an unbelievable game and game plan, as he always does. But to hold the team to 60 points below their average is unbelievable. That's a pretty crazy stat. They just kept fighting until, like you said, they got that the pass to Lagasse with 3 minutes left, a 52-yard pass. But even then, they were in bad field position the whole game. And that drive started on their 7-yard line, and they kind of got Lagasse on a little bit of a slip screen. I don't know what Shaq calls it, but little screen got him some breathing room. And then very next play, run the same play, except instead of blocking, you see Manning kind of slip up the sideline and Harmon put some air on the ball, which his coaches had been asking him to do. And Manning makes an unbelievable catch to get him out the midfield before Lagasse's touchdown. So it went from just being bottled up to like 3 great plays in a row, great play calling, great execution. And, you saw what happened.
Yeah, Coach, you mentioned it. Coach Wood, defensive coordinator for Cashion, certainly earned his paycheck there on Friday night, holding a juggernaut offense that averages 66 points per game to only 6 points on their home field in the semifinal game. But, Coach, while you and I are watching that classic in Pawhuska, there was another classic game going on in Thomas, Oklahoma, where the Thomas Terriers and Ringling faced off in the other semifinal game in Class A on Friday. You and I have both watched the film of that game and read about it. What an incredible comeback for the Thomas Terriers to advance to the state championship game.
Yeah, it really was. And the same sort of heart that you saw Cashion stop Pawhuska 4 times inside the 15-yard line. You saw the same sort of championship heart from Thomas against Ringling. You know, Ringling hasn't allowed more than 2 touchdowns all year, and Thomas scores 2 touchdowns in the last 4.5 minutes to win the game by 1 point. And they were down 2 touchdowns for pretty much the entire game. So I think that's as impressive of a comeback as you're going to get coming against the defending state champions that Ringling was. And like I said, it reminds, or like you said, it reminds us of kind of how the Cashion game felt. It felt like the whole game Thomas was fighting uphill. Just the way the game started, Ringling really ran the ball. They run it north and south a lot, and they do a good job. And they really moved the ball all night on a good Thomas defense. And, you know, if you watch the game, Thomas actually makes a stop early on. When I saw the score, I just wanted to see how it was going to play out. When I saw the game, it was, you know what, they actually made a stop, but then they jump on a 4th and 7-ish and give Ringling a makeable 4th down, and they make it, and then they go score. And then right after that, Thomas receives the kickoff, fumbles inside their 15. Ringling gets it back, and it's 13-0. They hold Thomas again, and they're driving. I think they're on the 18-yard line, about to make it 20-zip, and that's pretty much insurmountable against that defense. And it's 4th and 1. They're just doing a quarterback sneak, which I've seen it 100 times, Ringling on film this year. We played them. They always get 5-6 yards, but Aiden Kelly blows it up, makes the quarterback fumble on the 4th and 1. And from then on, even then though, I was like, okay, here we go. When's Thomas going to get into it? And they get held again, and they drop a punt, and they're about to get it blocked, and he kind of gets it off. And they really struggle early, but they make it 13-7 at half. And they just kind of stuck in, even though it got down 20-7, they stuck with it, and they fought back. Those kids don't quit. Thomas kids never do. And it ended up being a great comeback. You know, the Ward kid at quarterback ran a great 2-minute drill at the end of the game to get them to score with about 30 seconds left, and they win it by 1. So great semifinals. And I do want to add that you guys were giving me some crud on the sideline because I picked Thomas and Cashion to win, and they were behind the whole game. And I kept hearing it from you guys, but my picks held true. They both scored late and won by a point.
Great predictions by you, Coach, on Friday night on the pregame show with Thomas and Cashion both advancing. Although my guess is Coach Shackelford and Coach Ward were both a little nervous on the sideline there as we were into the heart of the 4th quarter.
Yeah.
And Coach, you mentioned it, Jackson Ward with an 80-yard touchdown drive there to tie the game, and then the extra point to win it there with about 30 seconds left. And what an incredible season for Thomas, 12-1 on the year. Their only loss coming to Cashion at that Week 3 matchup between these two teams there at Maxon Field in Cashion. And it's going to be really interesting to see the rematch between these two teams and how Thomas has evolved. It was only their 2nd game they had played this year when they played at Cashion. That was Cashion's 4th game that they had played. It's going to be really interesting to see some of the changes, the adjustments that both the coaching staffs make for this game Saturday night. Yeah. Well, folks, we have a great show lined up for you tonight as we get ready for this Class A state championship game. We'll take our first time out. When we come back, we'll have a couple of special guests joining us that will break down Thomas and Cashion, and then Coach Mendenhall will give us his thoughts on this matchup. Thank you again for joining this preview show hosted by Skordle.
At Maples Nixon Diesel Horse, we've helped a lot of people, and our goal was to treat each and every person like a friend. And as a friend, we've got your back always. We understand what you're going through. Being lawyers is what we do, but it's not all that we are. We care. We'll stand beside you throughout the entire legal process, not just as lawyers, but as your friends. We are Maples Nixon Diesel Horse, and we are here to help.
Welcome back to the Class A State Championship Game preview show. It's hosted by Skordle. We have the Thomas Terriers versus the Cashion Wildcats Saturday night, 7 p.m. on the UCO campus in Edmond. And helping us break down this game is a special guest, head coach of the Fairview Yellow Jackets, Coach Robert Bernard. And, Coach, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Coach, your Yellow Jackets faced this Thomas team in a district matchup that occurred back on October 2nd, so you're obviously very familiar with Thomas. Let's start with the Thomas offense. Tell us what Thomas is trying to do when they're on the offensive side of the ball and how you think they'll attack this Cashion defense on Saturday night.
Well, obviously, playing somebody like Thomas, a very experienced team, I've always thought this. It starts up front, and you talk about two big tackles. the two big tackles they have, the Billy Kidd, Aiden Kelly, obviously huge for them. You watch film of them. I can remember watching film the week we played them, and you can see them pointing out and communicating maybe to those other linemen, young linemen, even to the backfield. So those two guys, very, very experienced, well coached offensive line. So it definitely starts there with those two. Then you have the Hamberlin kid, the running back, such a great, patient runner. He does a very good job of being patient and finding the hole. So they use him in a variety of ways. Basically, everything we've always thought about them is they base a lot off their jet sweep. They use a variety of guys, different guys running that jet sweep. They'll decoy with the jet sweep. But they really love and base a lot of things around that. They're very multiple on offense as far as sets. They'll go unbalanced on you and use that to their advantage. So I think they do. Coach Ward does a good job of mixing that in, trying to almost out-scheme you. So he does a good job of that. Very athletic in the skill positions. Man, they got athletes everywhere, receiver, running back. But I think what makes them a little bit better than they were a year ago is the Ward kid at quarterback. He's able to throw the ball a lot better than they were able to last year. So he definitely gives them a little bit of an advantage over what they were last year. So should be a good game. Looking forward to it.
Certainly going to be a lot of athletes on the field on Saturday night. And Coach, let's switch over now to the Thomas defense and kind of the same situation that you just talked about with their offense. They have talent at all three levels there on the other side of the football. What do you see when you watch that side of the ball for Thomas?
Again, definitely you look at that Kelly kid, Aiden Kelly up front, tough to block. Even when you say we're going to put two guys there, he is definitely hard to block. And then you have the other one, the Billy kid on the other side. So up front, they try to two-gap those guys, it seems like. They're going to say run between the tackles. You're going to have to run through two big guys. So that makes it difficult in doing that. So, we tried to attack them in certain spots on the edges. We felt like we could there, but still you're talking about athletes on the back end that give him some good advantages there. So I think Coach Hart does their defense. He does a good job of mixing in their coverages. They do run a variety of coverages, but ultimately they want to be a cover three. They're a one high safety, which leads you into the Hamberlin kid on the back end. Such a great athlete on that side too. He covers up a lot of if they do have mistakes, he will cover it up in a hurry. He covers ground on the back end, does a good job of reading the quarterback, and then I've seen him make tackles behind the line of scrimmage. So definitely a great football player in that kid.
And Coach, you've mentioned his name a couple of times already, but let's talk about number 71, Aiden Kelly, a kid obviously who's going to be playing for Mike Gundy up there in Stillwater next season. Tell us what you see when you watch Aiden Kelly, especially on the defensive side of the ball, and how did your team try to game plan against him?
An absolute stud is what you see when you look at him. He's all there. When he steps off the bus, he looks the part. When you watch film on him, you better have two or three guys dedicated to blocking him every play, it seems like. But I'm going to tell you a little bit of story about him before I go much further. After our game with them, we did struggle a little bit this year. We're a very young team. But after the game, he happened to catch me. And he said, Coach, good job. I thought your kids played hard. He said, I know you have a bunch of young kids and your better years are ahead of you. So the fact that he took the time out to know that we're a young team is, you're talking about a special human being. So he is a great football player, but a great human being too. So, and I've heard a lot of good things about him on that side. So, but as far as a football player, you have to scheme, making sure we account for him every time. Run game, pass game, doesn't matter. I think he does a great job, great feet, first of all. But I think he does a great job with his hands. He gets his hands on people, and he can move you wherever he wants you based on the strength that he has. So, if you watch him play basketball, you see his feet. So, definitely for a big guy, he moves really, really well.
And, Coach, these two teams, Cashion and Thomas, met early on in the season. I think it was week 3 back in mid-September, with Cashion winning that game 28-7. your squad played Thomas a few weeks later, if I recall correctly. What has changed with Thomas since that time, and what do you see Thomas doing differently for this second matchup with Cashion?
I was actually at the first game, so I got to kind of see what that first game was all about. We had an open week. So I believe, if I'm correct, that was Cashion's fourth game, whereas Thomas was playing their second. So I think early Thomas was still kind of in that first game, just past a scrimmage kind of deal, and Cashion was well into their season. So that makes a huge difference. In the quarterback, the Ward kid, coming off an injury, being a little bit nervous in a big game like that, whereas those others had played some big games. I think Cashion hit him in the mouth early. I think they kind of took the big blow to the face or jaw, whatever you want to call it, but they kind of established themselves early, and Thomas was kind of playing catch up the whole way. I think they jumped out 14-0. So that in and of itself, for a young quarterback to manage his way through that, or at least an inexperienced quarterback, can be tough. I think a huge difference now this time will be that he is settled in to their game plans and all that. I mean, you watch the 2-minute drive. I happened to catch the last part of their game the other night, and he takes them on a 2-minute drill down the field to win the game. So definitely a better football team at this point. I think it's going to be one outstanding game for a state finals game. So I think Thomas is going to try to establish themselves early this time. I think that could help them, kind of their pace, what they want to do instead of having to play catch-up, I think is a big thing.
And you mentioned it, Coach. What an incredible 80-yard drive by Thomas there in the final minutes against the defending state champion Ringling team that has a very physical and good defense. A really impressive win there for Thomas in the state semifinals. Coach, any final thoughts on this matchup Saturday night?
Just that, you're talking about two teams that have been ranked all year, kind of the head of the class type deal. So for them to take people's best shots week in and week out and still be standing, tremendous. Good job to their guys. Good job to their coaches. Both staffs extremely great, good coaches. So definitely looking forward to it. I think it's going to be one heck of a game. But I will be there, and so it'll be exciting.
Well, we'll be looking for you, Coach. Thank you again for joining us to help us break down this Class A state championship game here on Skordle. Merry Christmas to you and your family. Best of luck to the Yellow Jackets in 2021. It's always great to have another Yellow Jacket on the show. We really class up the joint, if you know what I mean. So
that's right.
Right. Jackets, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Stream like the pros with Skordle Live. Find out more at skordle.com/stream.
Welcome back to the Class A Championship Game preview show hosted by Skordle. We have the Cashion Wildcats versus the Thomas Terriers Saturday night, 7 p.m. At Waltland Stadium on the campus of UCO. And to help us break down this game, we have a special guest here, head coach of the Minko Bulldogs, Brock Wardwall. Coach, thank you for joining us today. Congrats to your team on a district title this season. I know you'll be back in prime for a run in 2021. But your team had the fortune or misfortune, I guess, of playing Cashion back on September 11th of this season, and your district foes with Cashion in 2018 and 2019. Give us a preview or a picture of what the Thomas defensive staff is facing, trying to contain this offense that Coach Shackford runs at Cashion.
Yeah, sure thing. First of all, thanks, Andy, for you guys having me and able to discuss you guys a little bit of the pregame to the state championship this week. Yeah, with Shaq and their team, unfortunately, we've had to play them last 3 years, and they've got us every time. And it just seems like they keep getting better and better every year. We've seen them and faced them. With this season, I think anybody that knows and seen them, they're a little bit different this year in regards to what he has focused on offensively. they've always been able to do this, but the last couple of years he's focused a little bit more ground and pound running the football in 18 and 19. And this year, I don't know, necessity or just what he wanted to do with Harmon back there and with the cats he's got on the outside throwing it to. He's opened it up and thrown the football a lot more. And with him, with Shaq, you're gonna have to be prepared for a lot of stuff. I mean, I watched the game on Friday, and he brought some stuff that I know he hadn't done much this year to that game to be able to run the football a little bit. He threw that at Hennessy and Pawhuska, and that he did a lot more in 18 and 19, stuff that he hadn't really had to do any this year. And with his wing T stuff, misdirection stuff that they like to do, counter GT stuff that's really tough to stop. Just because it adds several different guys to the box. But, I mean, he's it's an Oshkosh of stuff that you got to be prepared for, and Thomas has obviously already seen him a little bit, and they've already seen him once this year, and I mean, that was probably their closest game outside of last week, Cashion's was. So they know what they're going to be getting. But with what we've seen from Cash in the last couple of years, I mean, you got to be prepared. If you want to try to make them one-dimensional, they can beat you on the other side of things. And this year, you want to go into each game, especially running the ball. You say you want to stop number 9 in Harold, but you shut him down. Harmon's just as capable of beating you in the run game. And you say you want to stop Green and make sure he doesn't beat you on the outside. Make sure number 10 doesn't beat you. And now they got 4 other cats that can beat you in the pass game too. So they're just tough all around. Good luck to Thomas trying to slow Shaq's offense down for sure.
And Coach, you just mentioned several stars that Cashion has on their offense. I wish we had more time to talk about all of them, but we're somewhat limited today. And I think Cashion's really led by number 9. You mentioned him, Caden Harrell, running back, middle linebacker. Having coached against Harrell the last 3 seasons, what do you see? What are your thoughts on Caden Harrell?
Oh, just get him blocked best you can. I mean, that's our game plan was always that. Now, I mean, this year for sure we didn't have the athletes to hang with Cashion as much as we had in the past, but you got to get him blocked, plain and simple. He's a very, very defensively. I mean, no knock to him, but defensively, I think where he probably hangs his hat on, and he's a very, very good linebacker, one of the better ones I've seen in a while in Class A. But he reads very well. He's very difficult to block, obviously one-on-one. And he's good enough in space that you're not going to block him with a pulling guard or anything like that. It's very tough with that. It's obvious with him that he's a defensive leader for sure, and just his physicality on both sides of the ball. I mean, you can obviously rally around that. And yeah, he's a heck of a football player, and anybody'd love to have him for sure.
Coach, you mentioned the Cashion defense. That's a unit that led by Tony Wood over there at Cashion that doesn't give up a lot of points. What are their strengths as a defensive unit, and how does Thomas score enough to come away with a win on Saturday?
Oh, their strengths are about everywhere. I mean, this year for sure. I mean, Coach Wood did a heck of a job. Their last week shows exactly. I mean, how good of a job he's been doing over there. It's shutting down the highest offensive juggernaut that they are. Pawhuska's been this season, and in keeping them to 6 points is pretty special. But obviously with that, he's obviously always going to have a good game plan, but you got to have the cats behind that to execute that game plan. And obviously his kids and Shaq's kids, they bought in, and they do a heck of a job with that. And I mean, with their strengths this year, I mean, again, not trying to knock anything to do. I think their strengths are on their back end and their linebackers. Up front, I mean, you're just a 3-man front, and they're not very big on the up front on defensive side. And so we're just looking at it. You say, well, we got to ground and pound and just run it straight at them. But I mean, that's easier said than done. And you got to have the ability to do that. And we didn't have the ability to do that this year. And obviously not many teams have had any success trying to do that either. Because I mean, when you look at it on paper, I mean, they're not very big up front on the defensive line. I mean, probably 200, 220 is the biggest cat down there. But so we got to run right at them. But again, the way they do, the way the technique they use, and the physicality, and they got a ton of speed on the backs on the defensive side. That it's tough to do anything really.
When you look at these two coaches, Coach Ward at Thomas and Coach Shackelford at Cashion, both of these guys have won a lot of football games at their respective schools for a long time now. What makes Coach Ward and Coach Shackelford so special, just to be able to do this year after year in Class A?
Yeah, I think it's probably obviously a combination of a lot of things. They're obviously very good coaches. They got good staffs. They got good communities that support what they do and how they do things. And obviously with all that, you can be the greatest coach in the world. And if you don't have some good football players, you're not going to the state championship year in, year out like these programs have been doing. It's a combination of all that. And, Coach Ward, known him for a long time over at Thomas, and they seem to have special years like this year in, year out. And there's not a program in the state that's got more tradition than Thomas, I don't feel like. And throughout the last decade, what Shaq's been doing at Cashion has been very, very special. Obviously, in regards to just getting there and having these deep runs, it's very hard to do. And the consistency Cashion's doing with it's pretty special what they're doing. And, it's two programs in the last decade that's kind of setting themselves apart, especially with them and Ringling probably on being the class of the class, so to speak, Class A football. And it's kind of fitting for these two to be meeting up in the state championship this year.
Coach, any final thoughts on this matchup that we have Saturday night between Thomas and Cashion? What's your prediction?
Oh, no prediction for me really. It's going to be I think Thomas, seeing each other in the years can be good and bad. I don't think it's really bad on either side. It's probably good for both sides. I think you have some a little bit of idea of what what each other likes to do. What I think is Cashion's going to lean on what they like to lean on to try and win the game. I think Thompson tried to do the same thing. It's just going to come down to what a state championship usually does is who gets the ball to bounce their way and gets a little bit lucky to go get the gold ball. So I'm looking forward to it, and I hope nothing but the best for Coach Ward and Coach Shack, and good luck to both of them.
Coach Wardwell, thank you again for joining us today and helping us break down the state championship game in Class A. Merry Christmas to you and your family, and best of luck to the Minko Bulldogs in 2021.
Thank you, Andy. Appreciate you guys having me. Merry Christmas.
Welcome back to the Class A state championship game preview show hosted by Skordle. And I'm joined again by Coach Jay Mendenhall of the Oklahoma Bible Academy Trojans. This game between the Cashion Wildcats and Thomas Terriers, we played at 7 p.m. on the campus of UCO on Saturday night in Edmond. Cashion, the designated home team for the game, so they'll be on the home sideline, which I believe is the west sideline. Coach Mendenhall, this matchup features two teams that have absolutely dominated Class A football for at least the past decade, and really more so with Thomas. Talk about these two programs and these two coaches and what they've been able to accomplish.
It's starting with Thomas. I heard the stat recently that they have over 50 district championships or something like that, the most in Oklahoma. So I don't know if you can have more tradition than that. I remember a couple of years ago when they were in our district, I looked at their roster, which these kids that are seniors were sophomores then, and they had more sophomores playing football than we had on our team. So every kid's going to be playing, from the town. They grew up wanting to be Terriers. And so that's just next level tradition. Obviously state championship recently, and I don't know how many they have, but growing up, it was all the time. Right. And we played against many great teams, the Terriers, when we played at Fairview. So they've always been good. And then you got Cash in the last, you said decade. Shaq's coaching record is pretty amazing. And I think you said, is it 4 finals appearances in the last 7 years? It's right. Just, there's a lot of teams that don't ever go to the finals, and just getting there is pretty impressive, especially 4 times in 7 years, because it's tough to reload, and they just keep doing it.
Coach, these two teams met back in week 3 of this season at Maxson Field in Cashion. The Wildcats won that matchup 28-7. 14-7 at halftime, and then Cashion put on 2 touchdowns late there in the fourth quarter to extend that lead and seal the game. Cashion's defense was really the story of that week 3 matchup. Held Thomas to 83 rushing yards on 34 carries. That's less than 2.5 yards per carry for that Thomas offense, which really has dominated most other teams they've played, especially running the football with with their jet sweep and everything they do off that jet sweep. Thomas had a total of 185 yards on offense, and Cashion had over 350 total yards. So a game that was really dominated by Cashion. Cashion's quarterback, Ben Harmon, number 12, had a solid day. He went 14 of 18 throwing the football, 267 yards, and had 3 touchdowns. He did have 2 interceptions in that game as well, but just the defense played so well that they were able to overcome any mistakes that were made on the offensive side of the ball. So, Coach, how do you see this matchup Saturday night? Obviously, it's been about 3 months since these two teams have played. They've both evolved and gotten better throughout the year. Based on what I've seen watching film, tell us what to watch for when Thomas and Cashion meet up at 7 p.m. on Saturday night.
Well, I think you said it. I think Thomas has to be able to – well, they're looking to establish the jet sweep. They have – if you watch them, they have really big splits, and they kind of want to get you going sideways and then gash you because they've got such speed with the Hamberlin kid, and the QB run game is just – it is pretty impressive. And so can they do that? And early on against Ringling and a couple other games, I think even against Cashion the first time, we played Cashion a couple weeks after, so we had that film. It was Skordle's game of the week, and Cashion shut down the jet sweep. It's all there is to it. But, against Ringling, and this is what Coach Ward does. I mean, they'll get in all sorts of formations to do it. They're always in a spread sort of thing. They're running a lot out of it, and so he can get unbalanced a lot, and he can make it happen. So early in the game against Ringling, they lose a couple yards here and there, and that happened a few times. But then, which is tough. I mean, if you're running offense against a pretty good defense, it's tough to get out of that hole, but they found different ways to do it. I noticed they ran trips to the boundary a couple times. They were able to get the edge because Ringling was in man, and so they could run those guys off and kind of have not even block them, And they got Hamberlin free a couple times on that. And so little adjustments like that is what I'm looking for. How can they establish that? And Coach Ward, I think it's his son there playing quarterback, but he can run it too, and they can read off of that as well and run back the other way. So I look for that. Can Cashion stop that? I feel like they're pretty set up to stop the jet sweep, and they did so in the first game. And then on the other side, if I say, can Aiden Kelly and Camden Billy get pressure on Harmon like Paul Huska did? Because it caused all sorts of problems last week. They were camped out in Cashion's backfield. So that's another key to watch for there. And then can Cashion throw it on? Can Thomas throw it on Cashion? They had a couple big plays where they did throw it. They got tall, rangy receivers. They're all real fast, and they all look exactly the same. I don't know how they do that there, but I think because Cashion, those safeties are running the alleys well to stop the jet sweep. But one pass, I think it was to the Mandarin kid, that or Rainwater, but he just faked it for a second, and they just froze just long enough, the safeties did, to where they got him free. And so things like that are going to be what I'm looking for. Can they do that again? I really felt like watching the quarterback for Thomas last week's game versus, week 4 against Cashion. He was coming down off his reads pretty early against Cashion and just going. If he didn't see something, things were collapsing a lot of times. And I felt like he really stayed on his reads longer against Ringling. And he can throw the ball and does a good job doing it. And that's how they won the game. So I look for keys like that. And then I guess the last thing to watch for is everyone healthy, Broadbent didn't play in the first game against Cashion. He's a great defender. But, we saw guys limping here and there like you are going to see on both sides in both games. So who's going to be there? Is that going to, cause any problems as well?
And, Coach, you mentioned Cashion's ability to stop the jet sweep in their first matchup. Specifically, why was Cashion so successful defensively against Thomas a couple of months ago? Is that just the team speed of Cashion? Is that the scheme that Coach Wood put in? What was Cashion able to do to really slow Thomas down rushing the ball in that first matchup?
I don't know. I think asking Coach Wood would be better. I think the 3-4 defense is set up on the edge to stop the edge, and they're just so aggressive, kind of like every team is now. Every team that's playing this time of year, all 4 of those semifinal teams, I was just watching them fly to the ball. And, when those big wide splits, sometimes Cashion was able to get a defensive lineman in there, and then both the outside backers were able to come up quite a few times. But even the safeties running the alley, they just get there so fast. That's my, I guess, novice opinion without talking to the coaches on why they could stop it.
Coach, what keys do you have for both teams to be able to come away with a gold ball on Saturday night?
I think what you're always going to hear and say this time of year, no turnovers, right? I don't think the game's going to be a 3-touchdown game like it was. It's early in the season. Both teams have added a lot of things in. I mean, their playbooks are full now. To see the wrinkles and things, there's going to be some cat and mouse, right? Because you already played someone, you know how they're going to line up to you, which is really your questions. But then what's going to happen when they don't line up to you? Because the defensive coordinator saw how they lined up and they saw how it worked or didn't work. So they're going to throw those things in there. And so just adjusting on the fly, and both staffs are really, really good about that. Those are top-notch. Coach Hart runs the defense over there at Thomas. Those guys are top-notch. And so it's just fun to watch games like that. But it's been 10 weeks since they played. And like I said, everyone's gotten better at different things. So I think that's a key to watch is what's going to – and then can Cashion run it? Like in the second half, they're able to kind of establish the run game, which is what I was going off last week in my Pawhuska prediction, but they never really got that going last week. And so is Thomas going to stop it like Pawhuska did? Because that just opens it up so much more for the passing game. So that's what I'm looking for, keys to the game.
That Cashion offensive line has had work cut out for it 2 weeks in a row now with that incredible Pawhuska defensive line, and now the same thing with Thomas. That's going to be a really interesting key to see how Thomas can run the football. I'm sorry, how Cashion can run the football against that Thomas defensive line. Yeah. Coach, any final thoughts on this matchup?
No, just can't wait to watch it. It's going to be a good one.
Well, that does it for us, football fans. Thank you so much for joining us here tonight on the Class A State Championship Football Preview Show. Thank you again to Coach Bernard of the Favorite Yellow Jackets, Coach Wardwell of the Mako Bulldogs, and Coach Mendenhall of the OBA Trojans for joining me today. Thank you to Skordle for the opportunity to discuss what's sure to be a great championship game between Thomas and Cashion. Best of luck to those two teams on Saturday night. And fans, be sure to follow Skordle to keep up to date with your favorite teams during basketball season and the other spring sports. And best of luck to your football teams in 2021. Again, my name is Andy Campbell, and thank you for joining us here on Skordle.